So today I want to talk about how to create a linear panorama. So what is a linear panorama? Well, the easiest way to explain is to compare it to what is a normal panorama. A normal panorama is something you can create quite easily on a phone or in a camera, and it's where you take a shot where you set up your tripod and you scan your tripod left to right, taking images as you go. And then you take those images from your camera and you put it in some sort of software, they join them together to combine the images together, so you create an image which is much longer and much wider than you would normally get just taking in camera alone. That's a normal panorama. So what is a linear panorama, and how does that differ from a normal panorama? Well, the difference is, instead of rotating the camera from a fixed point and moving left to right, you instead move the camera in parallel to the object you're trying to take and along the actual scene. Now, doing this creates a set of images like a normal panorama, but also creates some problems. The first problem you have is you have a parallax view of anything which is past or in front of what you're trying to take. So you have different angles on each shot. So say I had a spire in the background, that would be a different point in each shot. Not only that, you may well get problems with distortion of the actual lines of the buildings or things like that. And unless you have a very sort of non-distorting lens, you're going to get issues in terms of things bending at different angles as you move down, etc. The upshot of this is that if you try and put this software into a normal panorama creating software, it just will not create any of use. It does not understand the idea of linear panoramas. So we have to do something a little bit different. So let's give an example. This is the street I want to take a linear photograph of. It's my local high street. Now, the more observant you might see, there's a couple of issues here. Firstly, there's an awful lot of cars. The cars are going to go in the way of the buildings on the far side of the street. They're also going to block you on your near side of the street. This is a problem. The second problem is the street itself is actually quite narrow, which means you are probably going to have to use a wide angle lens to get the roof line in from the other side of the street. Wide angle lenses are going to create a lot of distortion, and unless you have a lot of money and you can buy things like a tilt shift lens, you're going to get a lot of curves on the building edges, the windows, and all sorts of things like that. The other problem is that you want to try and take the picture at the same level, but tripods themselves tend to be a bit profound on high streets, and certainly walking down a busy high street with a tripod and people trying to avoid you, trying to get it set up, trying to take the photo, you're not going to be the most popular person. Fortunately, in this particular case, there is a solution. Once a year they hold a festival fair in the middle of the street. To do this, they have to close the street down once a day to set up the stalls, and all the cars have to be moved out, and generally it's very quiet, which means I have a small window of opportunity to get in the street when there will be no cars, very few people, and I can get down the street with my tripod and take these photos. When I got the photos back, I did my best to actually put the image together, and to be honest with you, I failed. This was taken about 2 years ago, and they've basically been sitting on my hard drive ever since. But recently I've been trying to get much better at my photo processing skills, and I feel I've come up to the way where I can actually do this. So this is how I put them together. Okay, for this demonstration how we do this, I'm going to use Affinity, which is the tool I tend to use. I'm sure we can do the same thing in Photoshop, but Affinity is my tool of choice. So this is the image I captured on the day. It's looking northwards towards the church. As you see, we have the church spire in the background. So in all intents and purposes, things look okay. They look pretty straight. But if we put a guide on the picture, we can start seeing that things aren't quite as good as they first look. So if you look down here, the line is going off upwards. The windows are not quite straight, and in fact if we put a guide all the way over here, as you see, the wall on this building is totally askew. So the first thing we're going to do is correct the perspective, and to do that we're going to use perspective tool, and what it allows you to do is to warp the image as required, and you have to play around a little bit with it to get it right. In fact, what I often find is better just to put a grid on there, because that provides a better visual idea. So if you see here, the walls are fine here. Now the windows are fine. Yeah, we've lost a bit on its right hand side, which is great, but don't worry about that. As long as you've got enough coverage, we can recover that. And then at the bottom here we have the road, and as you see, the pavement is now flat. Trying to get these white lines a bit straighter. We've lost a bit here, so you have to fiddle around a little bit. It's a bit finicky, but after a while you just about get it right. So that's not bad. It looks pretty straight. Maybe just move his windows out a bit. Brilliant. Okay, so the wall is straight pretty well. The road is straight. This is straight, and I mean, the great thing about buildings is that they give you lots of nicer straight lines which you can do this against. If it had been some more jumpy, much more difficult. Anyway, we apply that, and that's our first starting point. The next thing we want to do is to create a space to put our separate image in. So what we're going to go is to Document, Resize Canvas. We're going to take off this little lock, which means we can create things in a different ratio. We want to move it to the far right because our image is going to live on the left hand side, and we're going to double the size of the canvas, so make that 8,000 pixels, and we resize that, and now we've got this space here we can put our new image in. So this is our second image. Now I've already done the straightening this image, so we don't have to go over that again. So we just select it, copy it, and paste it into our new canvas. And as you see, it gets created as a second layer. So next thing we want to do is try to line the two up. Now there's a number of ways you can do this. One way is to reduce the opacity of the first layer and try and position it, etc. The other way, which I find quite useful, is if we change the blend mode on here to difference. It gives us sort of negativity. It shows the areas where there's differences between the two layers. So as you can see, the windows here, try and get those lined up, and perhaps the wall, maybe. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay, and then once we've done that, we can just change to normal and have it lined up. And as you can see, it's sort of lined up, but there's problems. There's this bit here which is not lined up, and this bit here which is there. So we've got to try and correct those. So let's just scroll out a bit again, and let's see what we're going to do with that. Okay, so we've got to try and correct it. Now the first thing you can try is just try stretching the image. So if I stretch the image at the bottom here to line up these lines, and it's sort of working here, still got a problem here and here, so we can try and adjust at the bottom, and it sort of sometimes works, but most of the time it's just not going to work. So we still got a problem down here, we still got a problem here, so it's sort of lined up but not great. So we need a bit more work, and we're going to use another tool now. It's called the mesh tool. So, and what the advantage of the mesh tool is over the perspective tool is that you can relatively change areas. So I can stick a point on here, and I can stick a point on here, and I can move these areas, but it won't move any of the rest. So you just got to make sure you keep these parallel. So I can move this in a bit, etc., and keep the rest there. And we can go through the areas. So there's a bit of a correction here, and we can correct that, and maybe here perhaps it's not quite right. Okay, and here No one. And you just basically go through these areas and try to find the edge where things line up. Like I said, on a building, it's quite good because you've got all these power lines to follow, but it also shows any issues with the discontinuities. Anyway, we can apply the mesh, and well, that's a lot better. Now, there's a few issues to work on still. One of the problems is if we have these buildings where you are taking things from a slight angle, so we see this side of the building, but we don't see this side of the building. That might be okay, it can cause problems. And in fact, one of the things I wished I'd done when I was taking the first place was perhaps take pictures, make sure I was 90 degrees aside the wall so I can correct these later. But one thing we can do is we can build in this side of the building. So if we create a mask, new mask layer on that, and we go to our paintbrush and we create a reasonably good sized paintbrush and we do the black, then we can start painting in this side of this building. So that's a bit rough, let's just do that a bit closer. So we've got a bit there, try and get the whole of it in, and then we can, okay, so we've got a bit of discontinuity there, that's fine, we can correct that in a second. So let's just get rid of what we have here, just try and fill it out a bit. It's going to be a bit rough, I'm doing it quite quick, and we can sort of go with it later, make it a bit smoother. There we go. Okay, so as you say, we've got the building here, but it's a bit high. So again, we can go to our mesh tool and let's just go. That's better. Go to the mesh tool. And again, we can couple points on our mesh, and we can just bring this in a bit, or bring this out a bit, so it corrects it. Let's just there's that line as well. Down a bit again. Okay, so lined up, and we apply that, and zoom out again. And you see now we have the both sides of the building, which I think looks a bit better. Now, there's a number of issues on here. We have a sort of like difference in sky here. That can be a problem sometimes if you get to have a fixed aperture and ISO. But we can clone that out and with that. The other problem you tend to get is wires coming out the building, because obviously you're going to get different perspectives. So what you have to do is to go through and use your sort of, your context sensitive fill or your in painting tool just to fix those. So it's a number of defects. I mean, another thing you get, and if I show this takes it away, is if you look at the spire, you see the way it's moving. That's called a parallax, and often you will get, say, multiple images of an object in the background. Again, you just have to go through and clean up a little bit. So here we have the completed results. Obviously there's a little bit more work to be done. For example, you may have to crop them a bit, you may have to fill in some of the areas, remove some of the artifacts. But hopefully I think you can see the results are quite interesting and very different to a normal panorama. Obviously there are a lot of obstacles to completing this. You have to find the right subject, you have to be at the right time, you have to avoid all the normal things in a normal high street like cars and people. But when it does get done, I think the effect is quite striking. Not only does he put the building within context of a wider set of buildings, but he creates a great time capsule for future generations to see how something like a high street changes over the time. I hope this has been useful to you, and hopefully you can give it a go too. But till then, good luck and goodbye. Thank you for listening.